Earlier this week, Eric Holder made news by saying that the DOJ will not be stepping into Colorado and Washington to stop them from allowing recreational use of marijuana. Now, that was major news because the Obama administration has cracked down in a major way on the medicinal use of marijuana in the past, particularly in some of the western states like California, Seattle, or Oregon and things of that sort. So this was certainly news, and it looks like possibly a major turning point in the war on drugs, or at least on marijuana. When you couple that with later on the DOJ saying that they're going to allow banks to work with people who sell medicinal or recreational marijuana in the future, definitely looks like major progress is being made. But now there's some strike back, and it's coming from law enforcement itself. So we've got a letter from an organization that includes sheriffs, narcotics officers, and big city police chiefs that are slamming Attorney General Eric Holder and saying, you cannot do this. You have to continue to prosecute people regardless of the change in laws in these two states and possibly in future states. And what's interesting about this, and I'll get to the text eventually, is that law enforcement in the past, for the most part, is tasked with enforcing the law. But now we're seeing them stepping in and attempting to advocate for certain laws. So this is what they said in their letter. It is unacceptable that the Department of Justice did not consult our organizations, whose members will be directly impacted, for meaningful input ahead of this important decision. Simply checking the box by alerting law enforcement officials right before a decision is announced is not enough and certainly does not show an understanding of the value the federal, state, local, and tribal law enforcement partnerships bring to the Department of Justice and the public safety discussion. And they further go on to say that in regard to this particular decision by Eric Holder and the Department of Justice, the decision will undoubtedly have grave unintended consequences, including a reversal of the declining crime rates that we as law enforcement practitioners have spent more than a decade maintaining. I am not a law enforcement official, as has been said many times. But I don't believe personally that criminalizing or continuing to criminalize and enforce the criminalization of marijuana is causing lots of crime. I think that it's certainly causing a lot of people to go to jail. And so I guess you could say that because they're locking them up, they're in some way cracking down on crime. But I don't agree with the general point that they made there. And so a couple of points that I want to make about this, because there is the possibility that if there's a major push from this lobbying organization that includes the law enforcement officials from around the country that have a lot of respect by the public, that could cause the DOJ to reverse course. And we don't want that to happen. So certainly, not enforcing federal laws when it comes to marijuana will be a major change for the country. And if this does spread to future states in future elections, that's a major cultural and legal change. I totally understand that. And yes, it does put a lot of pressure on police to change their tactics. There's been the question in the past, do you have the people locked up who have used marijuana or sold marijuana in the past? I imagine that they will, but that could cause major problems. Police have contacts, people that they've worked with, people that they have had run-ins with in the past because of the illegality of marijuana. And now suddenly making it illegal and saying the feds are not going to step in, that does, it shifts a lot of what the police have had to do in the past. And so I totally understand that. But I also understand that the police in many ways have a vested interest in the continuation of the drug war. A lot of funding goes to police departments around the country to fund the drug war. A lot of prisons have been built. A lot of the funding to investigate and prosecute people who have sold drugs is dependent on drug use. And if suddenly marijuana, which is a major part of the war on drugs in America, if that's completely eliminated, then those police departments are probably worried about massive cuts in funding. That's a very real thing that could happen. I personally think that's a perfectly fine thing to happen, though not one without consequences. And also, of course, since we've been engaged in this war on drugs for more than half a century, it's not just the financial interests. These cops, a lot of them are probably true believers. They probably believe that marijuana leads to a lot of crime, that marijuana has negative health impacts that they have seen in their run-ins with criminals, and they probably believe that this war needs to continue. But unfortunately for them, the country is shifting, the culture is shifting, the climate that we live in terms of drugs is shifting, and they're going to need to get aboard as we go on to the future. The culture is changing. People don't want to see millions of people locked up for just using or distributing a little bit of marijuana. That's not the country that we want to live in. And unfortunately for these police officers who I believe are doing what they feel they need to do to make a safer America, you don't advocate for the law, okay? You enforce the law that our elected officials pass. We're the ones who choose those officials who pass the laws. And if in the future marijuana is legalized in more states, that's a new America.